Well, if you thought that the battle over the sanctity of human life was won with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, then this headline might wake you up. Mifepristone abortion pills to be carried at CVS Walgreens. The fact is, the battle to protect the unborn has reached a new level. And Steve Crampton, assistant to the general counsel here at AFA, is with us to shed some light on where all this is heading. Hi, Steve.
Great to be with you, Jeff.
Companies don't make these kinds of decisions without taking into account what the public is going to think about it. Does this mean that the marketplace is now more accepting of this as a way of life?
You know, I think there's a bit of wishful thinking in that.
Okay.
Polls show that for the Democrats, abortion access is like the number one issue.
Yeah.
So it's clearly hotly contested. And as you say, post-Dobbs, the Biden administration has pretty much bet the farm on the abortion issue, right? They're vigorously prosecuting pro-lifers under their civil rights division of the DOJ. There is this notion that somehow the sky has fallen as a result of Dobbs. And I think, frankly, that companies like Walgreens and CVS want to be on the cutting edge and kind of make a PR statement more than reflect what they think the public really is about nowadays. It's a very risky decision as a matter of business practice, it seems to me.
Attorneys general from 20 states have sent a letter to CVS and Walgreens with a warning that if they proceed with this, at least if they mail these pills out, they could be in violation of state and federal law. What does the law say about distribution of this drug?
That is actually a fascinating question because what we have on the books is what was called the old Comstock law, passed in like the 1870s. Mm-hmm. That's the federal law that was cited by the attorneys general, in addition to recent state laws that have gone into effect banning abortion and so forth. Mm-hmm. But the DOJ of the Biden administration, of course, isn't going to touch that old federal law. And there is some debate even among other legal scholars whether it's really valid in this context. But on its face, it does prohibit this kind of practice if you're mailing these abortion drugs. But what it's going to come down to, I think, is a state-by-state kind of case of enforcement. And how difficult is it, Jeff? Think about it. Are we asking federal or state officials to monitor our mail to ascertain whether we're receiving illegal drugs and all? I mean, that's a pretty disturbing proposition in itself. So you've got a real enforcement problem here.
Okay.
And although 20 states, rightly, I think, issued that aggressive letter, that leaves 30 that didn't. Okay. So we are a nation divided, and this is one of those issues. I mean, really, it looks a lot like the lead up to the Civil War. We're so dramatically of two minds on the issue of fundamental protection for innocent life.
Now, there was some issue of the FDA skirting its own requirements for this drug. Would you tell us about that?
Yes, there is a case now pending at the U.S. Supreme Court. Cert has been granted. Arguments are set for later, I think, this month. So we'll have a decision by the end of June regarding the issue whether the FDA ignored its own restraint and guidelines in opening the door to mailing these drugs. There really haven't been any new considerations of studies or anything like that. The FDA basically just did an about face. And so once again, I think, Jeff, what you have here is a case of the politicizing of everything that's in place. You can't really trust science anymore, you know. You've got experts on both sides that are politicized, and you can't trust federal agencies that in the past would really protect food and drug on a basis of neutrality and whether it's really harmful.
It's been estimated that 50% or more of all abortions now are done through medication or through a pill, through a chemical. Yes. How dangerous is mifepristone to women, Steve?
Sort of goes back to that FDA question.
Okay.
Some experts would say really dangerous. Others, it's harmless. And remember, too, Jeff, how we got to the legalization of surgical abortions in the first instance. They argued aggressively that you can't do this at home. It's very dangerous. Now what are they saying? Oh, you can do it at home. It's perfectly safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so I think the best evidence is it's dramatically more risky to the women. Pay no attention, of course, to the preborn child that's being destroyed in these processes. Some estimates are as high as 6 times more dangerous than the surgical kind of process. Moreover, remember, you have no medical supervision. These women, many of whom are desperate, Many have not done any research themselves. They don't know their own the gestational age of their child.
Okay.
And so you've got no follow-up. It's a disastrous situation, I think, medically.
Let's talk about the liability that could be in place for this drug. What sort of things could CVS and Walgreens face as a result?
Oh, I think the liability exposure is huge here because they are going to be in the process of administering drugs that can result in death of the mother. Complications, obviously, to the preborn child. There's also, by the way, conscience laws that will kick in, right? The employees of Walgreens and CVS who may have religious objections to participating in this thing are now going to have lawsuits possible in pushing back against being forced to administer the drugs. It's just a Pandora's box of legal liability. It's extraordinary what we face here.
We're not dealing with antibiotics or steroids.
Exactly. And of course, then you've got the complication of the women who think, well, I'm ashamed of doing it. That's why I'm doing it in the dark at home anyway.
Yeah.
They're probably not going to report most of their disastrous side effects. If they show up at the hospital, they may lie. In fact, they're encouraged by some abortion providers to lie about why you're there. And so it is, again, it's just a mess.
It is a mess.
I think.
Steve, March for Life posted on their X account, formerly Twitter, they said, time to boycott CVS and Walgreens. Pharmacies should be places that provide medication to help life, not end it. We live in a free market economy. Do you see people choosing to leave these companies for another place for their prescriptions?
I certainly hope so. I got to say amen to that call. You know, AFA has a great history of calling for boycotts. Ultimately, we are still, by and large, a nation of the people, right? And when the people take a firm stance on something like this, companies like Walgreens and CVS have no choice but to listen, else they go out of business. So I, for one, will be taking my business elsewhere.
All right. Steve, thanks for giving us your insight here.
Thank you, Jeff.